Hey everybody, this video is for students conducting original research. What we're going to do is discuss creating your methods section. So right now what you can see on my screen is the Canvas page, and what you should be able to do is click writing your methods. And first we're going to talk about the quantitative, which is actually very similar to the qualitative as we approach it. So we'll look at some of the subtle differences. But if you click writing a methods quantitative, what you'll see is a document outlining what the methods should look like. So what we'll start out with is your participants section. Use the header participants. Left justified, we're still going with APA for now. And what you're going to do is just thoroughly describe the participants you intend on recruiting. So everything from age, sex, sports, status, if for some reason you're doing like married or not married, or if you're doing freshmen versus seniors, that's kind of what I mean by status. Be specific in that exclusion criteria. Typically, when I think of an exclusion criteria, I think of two key things that you want to consider. First and foremost, we want to keep our participants safe. So if there's something that could harm somebody that has a particular vulnerability, for instance, if you are doing some type of experiment on shoulder range of motion, you'd likely want to exclude people that have had a recent shoulder injury or are experiencing some type of upper extremity pain. So anything that would make a participant likely vulnerable to any type of injury or harm, this could be physical, emotional, psychological, any type of harm. We usually want to consider that and eliminate them from our possible participant pool. We also want to look at people that may totally throw off our data. So I always think about the professional athlete. If we're collecting data on the normal population, sometimes those people could be considered outliers. So just making sure that you are actually collecting data on the participant pool that you intend on collecting them. Any additional information for your inclusion criteria, and then make sure you include your recruitment strategies. Is this going to be word of mouth? Are you going to be using social media? How will you be using it? Email. And eventually, as we get into the CPHS application, you're actually going to have to create a document. Like if you were to send out an email, you're actually going to have to write up what that email is going to look like. If you're using a social media messaging system, you're going to actually have to write up the message that you're going to send out to be approved through CPHS. So as you consider how you're going to recruit, just recognize that we're going to need to submit these recruitment materials in our next section as we move forward with CPHS. Instrumentation, this is really referring to the instrument that you're going to be using to measure your dependent variable. A lot of times when we think of quantitative data, this might be something like a goniometer to measure range of motion. So just thinking about what that instrument is. And for survey research, this actually could be the survey instrument itself. So it might take a variety of forms, but however you are measuring that dependent variable, we want to describe it here. You also need to be pretty specific: the make, model, year, brand, publisher, who created it. All of those pieces of information are going to be important because we want somebody to be able to replicate your study. So be thorough in what measurement tool you're going to be using. If you're unsure, now's the time to start looking into those things. We need to make sure that you actually have access to the instrument that you intend on using. How will you establish reliability and validity? Some of these tools have existing reliability and validity in the literature. Make sure you're reporting on that. If you are creating a survey tool or creating some type of assessment tool, then we're really going to have to look at how you are going to establish reliability and validity prior to using that tool. Procedures, how do you actually use this? What are the step-by-step instructions in order to use that instrument? For example, with the goniometer, we look at where the movement arm is going to be aligned, where the stationary arm is, what the access point is going to line up with. All of those things are typically pre-existing when we look at the instructions on using the tool. So what you could do is you actually could include those specific instructions in a separate appendice. If you've created your own tool, then we're kind of looking at a whole different beast there. We're going to actually have to create your own protocol and an outline for somebody to be able to follow. The procedures. So this is actually what the testing session is going to look like. Because you've already gone over how to use your instrument, you don't need to repeat that in the procedure section. But what you do need to is think about what the participant will be doing from the moment they walk in that door. So we always start off with they're going to sign an informed consent. Typically after that they complete a demographic questionnaire, so you can make sure that they meet all of the components that you want for your inclusion-exclusion criteria. And then, if you're going to have them do a warm-up, what are the steps that you're actually going to have them do? When will you actually give a certain group the treatment, or what will the control group do? So being very specific in these procedures. What I've found is sometimes it's easier to start off, just create a checklist, like a step-by-step checklist, and then put it into paragraph form. That way you make sure you don't skip anything. And then finally, the treatment of data. What type of statistic are you going to use? Descriptive statistics. This is your mean, median, mode, ranges. Those are all of the statistics that just describe your set of data. They don't actually make any inferences on them. The statistic that will do some type of inference on the data is typically your t-tests or your ANOVAs or your MANOVAs, some type of regression analysis. And we can talk more about that one-on-one if you're unsure about the type of statistic to use. Your statistic will be determined by your experimental design. So depending on how you do your grouping, depending on how many dependent variables you're actually measuring, will give us an idea of the statistic that you're going to use. The alpha level, we're going to make sure we announce a priori. Typically, an alpha level we look at is a P is at less than or equal to 0.05. We use the confidence interval of 95%. And again, if you have additional questions on that, just feel free to reach out to me. And then if you're using any type of ANOVA or advanced level statistic, oftentimes we need to use some type of post hoc testing if we do have significance. So you might want to just determine what type of post hoc testing you're going to use if you're using something other than a t-test or a basic correlation. Other than that, that's kind of what we're looking at for the methods section. What we'll do is once this method section's complete, you'll turn it in. I'll take a look at it as quickly as possible so that I can give you feedback. You'll take this methodology and you're actually going to incorporate it into your CPHS application. There'll be a couple other components you'll need to add in, but for the most part, the bulk of the CPHS application will be covered with your methodology. So you're already one step ahead. Just make sure that you are following along with these instructions. If you are a qualitative project, your methodology will be very, very similar. The only big difference is as we get down into your procedures, you're not going to have an instrumentation section because we're not measuring something. We're doing some type of exploration. So what we'll likely do is have an interview or maybe do focus groups. So in your procedures, you're going to explain those step-by-step instructions. You'll also need to determine how you're going to establish trustworthiness within your study. So be specific in that. And then your treatment of data. So how will you code? If you need to go back, you can use that Creswell text that we looked at last semester. He's fantastic about explaining coding and establishing trustworthiness. So if you have any questions, definitely look back to him first. And then if you have additional questions, please reach out to me and we can talk more about how to handle that component. Again, one of the things about, I just noticed this, but you are the instrument in qualitative research. The researcher themselves are the one who is assessing and understanding and analyzing that data. So when we approach qualitative research, we want to make sure we're disclosing any biases we might have, but also embracing the fact that you are the instrument and that you're going to be the one who's interpreting the data that you collect. This week should be a fairly busy week for you all for writing your methodology. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, and hopefully we can move forward pretty quickly so that we can get you all through CPHS so you can be collecting data as soon as possible. Have a great week, and I will talk to you all soon.